I've had a chance to think on what the data we have from the observations by the James Webb Space Telescope of the furthest known things. Pardon the cat. Scientists estimate that the Big Bang, as it were, would have occurred like 13.5 billion years ago or something. But that we find things that are not only, if you were to have 2 points which could become the opposite ends, we're at the center of our observable universe. And at the opposite edge of our perception is an entire universe's worth, it looks like, that is itself like this, that is then, there could be a center point, hypothetically, and if there was a world with people observing, they could then look and see this edge and see that there's more. So there's another universe. This universe and our universe, that however long ago at the Big Bang, as it were, would have been at one. And everything in between two. That's how big the actual universe is. And more, probably. But, beyond that even, they suspect is more. Which means that even then, whatever that Big Bang moment was, there was already more. Think about that. What they describe as the Big Bang, in many ways, does analogize with the actual wording of the creation of the universe in the Bible. Light and darkness, but they were one, and then they were separated, and all this other stuff. Well, basically, at the initial moments after, and we're talking the smallest quantum millimicroseconds in the process of, and that's even, my little pop is longer. Then there was the periods of expansion and everything. What are they did? There was a rapid inflation that actually would have exceeded the speed of light, theoretically. Just by virtue of the speed it went, was how fast it went. So, I mean, I suppose that speed, whatever that speed is, could be like some actual fundamental speed limit or real speed of causality without space-time and mass, matter, and etc. in it. But the initial moment is the universe being so dense that matter could not coagulate, that light could not propagate, that those particles could not yet exist. It was too hot. It couldn't even glow, because glow is photons emitted. But eventually, it expanded to the point that, theoretically, hypothetically, I'm not so sure, would have expanded to the point that enough space for single moment of a photon was possible and therefore occurred. The isness of this thing being instead of not being, and not being has like a hyphen. It's not two words, it's one word, not being. Because of the isness of it, I would suspect there's a nature of the likelihood of occurrence, because they've also found quantum tunneling and examples of where they think that our sun would not actually have been massive enough to ignite stellar fusion, but because the mass of the cloud was enough that it was a virtual guarantee, it began early. And they think this may happen a lot. And it also makes it even harder to answer any questions really about anything to do with, space physics, how things work. They could be like, yeah, this is how they move, and we can see what they seem to be doing. But the actual origins of all these things, even as they find stuff, it's like, okay, but if we were to measure the mass of this, it would be like, oh, wow, this isn't quite enough. Or it's igniting at a point where it isn't quite enough, but even though there is enough. And that's just for a main sequence star. That doesn't even get into, red dwarfs and how those happen. So what I'm getting at is that at this initial point, the likelihood was, and therefore it was, heat was emitted. The universe began to cool slightly. These quantum fluctuations of the isness versus the not being, it would have pretty much been the entire initial duality or whatever separation. But from after that, there was much more expansion of our part of the universe coming into being. But it's like, it would be as if an entire cosmos worth of stuff just kind of come to being in an existing universe already. Just whoosh. So that means that there might be other places where there's like a wave of where entire chains of universes are pushed or jostled or something. You know, this would require another type of space time that is completely beyond what essentially it would be something that a much larger scaled up version of what the construction of the universe actually does. It's beyond comprehension, honestly, how big it really is. You can see these huge maps of the universe and be like, okay, that's incomplete. Beyond that, there's more. And then there's the whole thing with the couple of universes aside on all directions. That's also not just that, but in every direction. That much of it all came from here. Over time, has now been here. It's just outside of any possible communication, at least at light, and beyond visibility as far as light goes. So where the photons emitted from a certain distance of universe are probably still traveling this way until they just run out of energy and cease to be. They kind of eventually, things like that, the little packet of energy is essentially exhausted and there's no container of the packet. It just blends in with the rest of the background. And it just simply becomes a measure of the energy of the universe, which I suppose we all do one day. But they've recently discovered that there is so freaking much more, that what I said at the beginning with the thing with the chains of the universe is probably correct. And it's not even like universes are a unit like that. We're going based on our observable universe and a certain measure of reason beyond to say that, yeah, there's more. So we can use our particle horizon and everything we are able to discern in any slightest way beyond that, the farthest edge of that, to, if we were to use that as a radius or a diameter as units of measurement of the universe, we have no freaking clue how much more there is. But we do know that there was more of it. Even this, our universe and everything in it all still existed before the Big Bang. But the what that existence was before, I mean, also time doesn't, it's a logical end to an infinity. And I guess that's kind of the thesis point, the thing that I was just thinking about before recording this. If it was something, I think it was actually an Anton Petrov video I was watching where he said something about what infinities are. In physics and all this other science, if you come to something that answers to what you can call an infinity, answers infinity, well, that doesn't mean it's infinite. That means that you lack further data. Which is what I mean by inferring beyond the limits of what we can literally detect, which we've just expanded greatly. And it's a lot. And we can figure there's more. That puts a lot of other things into perspective, for me at least. To a degree, and for a time. But the beginning is still an infinity. It's simply this concept of before, I think, lacks further data situation. And that how to explain that, a period of inflation from everything that is now was literally a singular, infinitely small point that is now bigger than everything. And yet before that, there was a whole bunch even more everything. eventually, science may be able to figure out a way to make sense of that, but that seems to be how it is. But remember that if your answer comes to an infinite, it's just before there was nothing. Okay, even by scientific standards, the idea of creation of an entire macrocosmos of more than you can possibly imagine, possibly detect, more than you could ever interact with or interact with itself beyond limits, out of nothing, requires something like an act of God, creation ex nihilo. That's about all I got. This will upload when I am around better cellular reception.